Welcome to today's webinar, Girls in STEM and the Women Who Inspire Them. My name is Cynthia Hernandez. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for PCS Edventures. PCS Edventures was founded in 1988. We've been in business a little over 30 years. Pat McShane opened Pat's Computer School as an after-school program where students would build and take apart computers. The program was so successful that it expanded to other fun programming that grew into a network of experiential learning centers across Idaho, Washington, and California. Educators became very interested in our programming and wanted to adopt it in their learning environments. So the company shifted gears, developing products for after schools, camps, and are widely used as classroom extensions. Our programs have been adopted in over 7,000 locations in all 50 states and in over 17 countries. We develop hands-on, turnkey solutions for educators that fuel a passion for learning and a lifelong love of STEM. I'm excited to welcome every single one of you. We have a large group of educators joining us from all over the US, and I see Spain and the UK also represented. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for your dedication and desire to expand your toolkit to further support, mentor, and inspire the girls around you to help them build their self-confidence so they can fearlessly break through barriers. Today's moderator, Sonia Galaviz, is a multi-award-winning 5th grade teacher and STEM coordinator at Garfield Elementary here in Idaho. Sonia will be joined by our guest panelists who I've had the pleasure of connecting with. These women you'll hear from today have made it their mission to make a difference in young girls' and women's lives and are here today to share best practices with you. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Foster, founder and president of STEM Like a Girl, Janice Levenhagen-Seeley, founder and CEO of ChickTech, Wendy Erikson, Women in Drones podcast host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, representing Women in Drones.
And if Sarah, if you're there, you can pop back in. So our agenda is, we apologize for the glitch earlier. Our agenda, I'm going to ask the panel 3 questions, and we're really fortunate to have Sarah Foster with STEM Like a Girl, Wendy Erikson with Women in Drones, and Janice Levenhagen-Seeley, CEO of ChickTech. So I'm going to ask these 3 questions. Each of them will answer. And then at any time, webinar participants, if you have a question or want to, directly address one of the panelists, just go ahead and type it in the chat feature on this webinar, and we'll get to that at the end of the program. So our first question will be what what they do to engage girls in STEM. So each of the women on our panel, they have a specific program that they run. So they'll talk about what they do and what they do to engage girls. And then, of course, as teachers, we want to know, like, how can we uptake that? What can we do in our programs? So they'll talk to us about what educators and those who are providers of STEM for girls can do. And then the last thing, they'll address funding and resources, because I know across the country, that's a huge issue. How do we get the resources and the bandwidth to be able to do what we want to do? And then we'll take your questions from the participants of the webinar. And then there's a giveaway at the end, and Cynthia will help us with that. So we'll jump right back into that first question. So the first question was about the organization and the program of the panelists and what they do to specifically engage girls in STEM. And so I'm going to go back to Sarah. If she would give us just a quick recap of what STEM Like a Girl does and how it got started and what you do to engage girls in STEM.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I had a little connectivity issue, so hopefully I'm back now. But I'm really excited to be here with everyone and share a little bit about our program. So my background is in chemical and biomedical engineering, and I worked in research and development for a biotech company for a while. And the idea of STEM Like a Girl, which we're located in Portland, Oregon, came about a few years ago when I was doing some volunteer work at my son's elementary school. And I was going around to the different classrooms to do some STEM projects and noticed that in like the kindergarten to second grade, the girls would jump right in and ask questions and get their hands dirty to do the projects. By the time they got to fourth and fifth grade, I noticed they weren't raising their hands as much. They were kind of sitting back and letting the boys take over in the projects. And it really surprised me to see a gender gap happening so early. So I looked into different programs in our area that I could try to get involved in. And there's so many great middle school and high school programs, but I wasn't finding a lot for the elementary school age that wasn't expensive summer camps or after school programs that required a lot of time commitment. So I formed STEM Like a Girl, which we're a nonprofit organization, and the goal is to introduce and engage young girls in STEM activities. So we focus on 3rd through 5th grade girls. And one of the things that makes our program unique is that we really encourage family learning. So all of our workshops are parent-daughter workshops. So a parent or other adult caregiver attends with their daughter, and they work together as a team to solve different hands-on projects and activities that we do. And we found that it's not only important to engage and excite the girls in STEM, but especially at this young age to engage and excite the parents and to build confidence in all of them. So we do half-day parent-daughter workshops, and I'm kind of excited to share a little bit more about what we do. So my first general suggestion would be to start early. And I think a lot of people, think that more of that high school, like that's when they're starting to get into college applications and stuff like that. But, really getting them engaged by, before middle school is so important. And there's lots of studies that show that by 14, girls are starting to self-select out of advanced math and science classes. So if you can, get them engaged and excited early, that would be my, number one recommendation. And second, from what we've seen, is engaging the parents. And I think this has a broader range in engaging the educators too. So you as a parent, as an educator, need to feel confident in doing STEM activities with girls or your daughters or whoever your target audience is. And we found that so many parents, especially that aren't formally trained in a STEM background, really don't know what to do. They don't have the confidence to do these types of projects with their daughters, or they think they need to buy expensive kits and things like that. So really, showing parents or educators that these things are exciting to their daughters, are easy to do, and building confidence in the parents too, is kind of really important. And so I'd say those are kind of some of the two key things that we've found about engaging girls.
Sarah, that's incredible. And I'm excited to talk to you more about later after the webinar about that research, because I'm reading the same thing, that those dispositions for STEM are being set between ages 10 and 14. Mm-hmm. So that's 5th grade. So that, lends itself perfectly to what you're saying, that elementary outreach is critical to get these kids thinking, this is for me. Like I can do. And how
especially,
amazing.
when there's, when there's so many programs that are amazing for middle school and high school girls, but if they've already decided in their minds, I'm not good at math or I'm not good at science, they're not going to pursue those programs. So that's why I think it's really important.
For the parents to learn along with their daughter, where they don't have to be the expert, they're going to learn together. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
So same question over to Wendy. Wendy, tell us about your organization and what you do to engage girls in STEM.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here as well. And I want to say that I am the 14-year-old girl that you were talking about. Okay, about that age is when I decided that I had to work twice as hard at math and science, and English, I was getting A's on my English papers. So therefore, when people said, well, what are you good at? I thought, well, I'm best at English, and I must not be good at math and science because it takes me twice as long and I only get B's and an occasional C. So that kind of set me on the path. Well, all right, writing is it. I must be a journalist. And here I am 25 years later, and I was a journalist all my life. It was a wonderful career, but I think that the the perception, the questions people are asking me. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? That kind of does these kids, these girls especially, a disservice, because we need to teach our girls that, you know, things that are worth working for are difficult sometimes. Science, technology, engineering, and math can be difficult, but it's problem solving and it can be so rewarding in the end. So anyway, I got off subject, but I'm like, you're talking about me. I was a journalist in the television world for about 25 years, and I took a break. And while I was on my break, raising my 3 daughters, I saw some drone images on network television, and I started researching. I thought, wow, this is a game changer for journalism. And I just kind of got hooked on all the other things that drones are being used for, and started going to seminars and met a few other women, and we got together and said, wow, there aren't very many of us in this arena. Let's start womenindrones.com and kind of share stories and just stay connected. And that's how Women in Drones was formed. It's only been about 3 years now. And as a journalist, I was in charge of telling stories about the women out there around the world who are doing things with drones. We quickly realized that if we wanted to grow the number in the drone industry, we were going to need to target girls. And so that's when we started our presentations and just going around talking about drones and showing girls what they do, what they are used for. And more people are buying them, seeing them in the air. So that's kind of how our STEM education portion of Women in Drones got started. And I am not an educator myself. I know most of you out there watching are in the education world, but most of my knowledge that I'm going to talk about today comes from raising my 3 daughters. My oldest is 24, 21, and my youngest is 18. And I vividly remember having a conversation with my oldest daughter who was good at science and math. Why she was telling me why she did not want to go into engineering. She didn't understand what engineers do, even though her dad, my husband, is an engineer. And I'm like, you know what, you're right. She doesn't know really what engineers do. My husband designs valves for the automated valves for the industry. Well, that didn't sound very exciting to her. I had a battle with her to use her skills and which she enjoyed doing. She enjoyed science, technology, engineering, and math, but she wanted to go take a different direction because of peer pressure, what her friends were doing, and because it didn't sound fun, and she didn't know a lot about it. And one of our favorite phrases is, girls can't be what they can't see. So our mission with Women in Drones is to show girls what they can be. And that speaks to my background as a television journalist. I believe pictures speak 1,000 words. So, so what we do in our presentations is we advertise them showing girls and showing women. And also we appeal to the girls in their interest areas, because the girls who come in the door and they're not, sometimes don't even want to be there, right? It's a Girl Scout troop, and they had to come and attend this presentation. But our presentation starts out with, I show a picture of drones being used in a fashion show. That gets some of their attention. Not that all girls are stereotypically, I know that's a stereotype, girls love fashion, not all do, but some do. So you meet them where they are, whether fashion. I show women who use drones or drone pilots for search and rescue. Or the animals, using drones in the marine biology sector, how they're helping whales, learn more about whales. So appealing to where different girls are at with the same drone doing all of these different things seems to really pull them in, get their attention where you can, and put the tools in their hands. Obviously drones are they're an attention grabber right off the bat. So in that case, I'm lucky with that. But whether it's I say they start with the selfies, the girls like their phones and they like selfies. Again, that's stereotypical, but a lot of them do. So I say, hey, let's take a selfie, and then I show them the drone in the air taking the picture. But then we move the conversation on. You've got their attention, and then we talk further presentations or get them interested in, well, how do drones work and how they and what we can code drones or other devices to do. So that's how we work on with that. And it's just most of the presentations, Women in Drones, that we've been doing have involved girls and boys, but we're happy to say that over half have been girls at the presentation. And I think that speaking to what Sarah said, all girls, getting them all together and spending time with moms, getting them involved, all help build the girls' confidence. My girls always had a confidence issue. Mom, I'm not going to do that. And if there are boys there, you don't want to be embarrassed. But I think grouping them with other girls, whatever the scenario is really helpful in building their confidence. So,
Wendy, I love that phrase that you said, you can't be what you can't see.
Can't see.
How important is it that they see you, a strong female role model, and that you had different interests but came to STEM through drones? That's incredible. You spoke to that you were doing presentations to like a Girl Scout troop. I was wondering, what are some of the other groups? Like, who are you accessing, like, for groups of girls or enable, to talk with girls about these options?
Well, libraries, we've done a lot of libraries and the Girl Scout troops and Challenger centers. We have a Challenger center here in the St. Louis area that requested that we come and speak to a group of their girls. But it is difficult. It is difficult to attract girls in a subject that's one of the STEM subjects. So I think the Girl Scouts is a natural, obviously, and they have expanded their offerings in STEM badges and things like that. But we hope to, we're in the beginning phases of our STEM outreach to girls, but we're hoping to just word of mouth, how much fun it was. Like when girls go home and tell their parents, "Wow, I really enjoyed that." That's a good thing and the best advertising that we can get.
That's awesome. Thank you, Wendy. So, and last for our first question, Janice from ChickTech, I'd like to ask you, tell us a little bit about your program and what you do specifically to engage girls in STEM.
Sure, yeah. So we're a national nonprofit. Our mission is to get and keep girls and women in tech. So we work on both the pipeline side to get more girls in tech, and then the retention side to keep women in tech with our different conferences and our meetups as well. So obviously this is about girls, but that is a really fantastic part of our organization because it brings in some amazing mentors and volunteers for our youth programs. So on the youth side, we focus on our signature high school program. So really finding girls who haven't been given the opportunity to get engaged in technology as a creator yet. So whether they've run up against those stereotypes, they were turned off by a STEM experience in elementary school or middle school, or their parents aren't engaged in the tech sector, so they're not familiar with careers and aren't steering their children towards it. So we are looking for, there's the 5 to 10% of girls that are lucky enough to get engaged with something like STEM Like a Girl or some of the other middle school programs, but then there's everyone else, and in particular low-income youth and youth of color. And we really work to engage those girls that have been left behind by schools or have been left behind by these other programs. Because while I 100% understand the idea that their mindsets are set earlier, in my mind, it's never too late for a girl or a woman, up to 70, 80, 90 to start coding and to start looking at what a degree or what a career in technology could look like. So the ideal, of course, is we catch them with the amazing programs that Sarah runs. But the sad reality is that so many of these girls don't have those opportunities, and so we want to be there to catch them and provide them with those amazing workshops that get them that hands-on experience and help them to boost their confidence, so that we can start changing their mindset and start reversing the damage that those stereotypes have done to their ability to see themselves as technologists earlier. So our high school program starts with a kickoff event in the fall. We get teachers and other educators in informal learning programs to nominate girls to our program, so that we really are finding girls who haven't been opting in yet. And this is the way that we found works really well. Because once somebody shows confidence in them and gets them to feel like maybe this could be a part of their identity, they'll at least usually try it once, right? And maybe it still isn't right for them, but at least they tried it rather than opting into those stereotypes forever. And then there's monthly events after that, and it's really focused on that hands-on learning. And really, it's hard to say, oh, I can't do that thing when you've literally just done it. So, I mean, you still can. Like I've done that before, but it's harder, right? And those experiences start to add up of, oh, maybe next time an opportunity comes up, maybe I will choose to opt into that. And then we have another pilot program around middle school clubs in rural areas that we're starting to pilot this year. But most of our experience has been around this high school program. So I'll stick with that for now, unless people have questions with that later, because I don't want to take up too much time. But two of the things that I'd love to really highlight with those, one is get them excited about problem solving. So often I hear, or like you see job descriptions and they're like, oh, you could be a full stack developer. I'm like, who the hell cares, right? Like, what are you doing with that? Like, it's just a tool. Like if somebody was like, hey, check out this hammer. Don't you want to be a hammerer? Which is clearly a word. You just didn't realize it before this. Like I'd be like, I don't know, what am I going to build with this stupid hammer, you know? And I actually love woodworking, so I don't feel that hammers are stupid, but you know, it's all about like, how does it relate to their lives, and how can they get excited about it, just like especially Wendy was talking about. And so my example for this is I was talking with a person who was running some YMCA programs, and my daughter had gone to a Lego summer camp, and it kind of turned her off from Lego workshops or camps almost. Like so far, she's 12 now, and I think she was 5 or 6 at the time. She was the only girl, and it was very focused on boys, and it was very focused on what are you building. So it was, you're going to build a monster truck and make monster truck noises. This was the literal wording in this thing. And they're like, why aren't we getting girls? I'm like, that's a mystery. But one of the things, you know, I talked to them afterwards, and I was like, what if, you know, so you're building a crane, like, so what, right? Like, what if instead of just building a crane, you tell them that the reason they're building a crane is because there's a baby animal stuck in a well, and you're going to use that crane to like get the baby animal and save it. Or you're building a bridge, that's fine, but what if you're building a bridge because, and this is obviously smaller children, but you're building a bridge because you're in Alaska and there's some kids on an island that wouldn't be able to go to school without this bridge. And so it's super easy, and the boys will be more engaged as well, so it's nothing that would turn boys off. But you get multiple parts of their brains working, and you get them really excited about it. And the other thing that I've noticed is that it doesn't take a lot. So personally, from my experience, I hadn't thought about a technical career until my senior year of high school, when I have a computer engineering undergrad. My grandma just off the cuff one time said, like, hey, you're really good at math. Why don't you check out engineering? And I'm like, I guess so. And then I just went and did that. But we see that so often with our nomination method, and we see it so often when girls are working with adults, where it only takes one thing, like the teacher says, you should really consider this program. Like, I could see you being really good at tech. Like, I know you haven't tried it before, but why not? And then they try it, right? And it just took that one teacher to take 2 minutes out of one day and do that. And obviously there's so many things going on that that should never fall on just the teachers. So that's obviously just an example, but we as adults have so much more influence over these youth in such
Attention. Version update available.
In such an interesting and tumultuous time of their lives, that we don't realize that just that one little piece of whatever we say could change the trajectory of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I love that, Janice, you're referring to the equity that's needed, like when you're talking about that program for your daughter, like the equity to be able to access the entire audience in the room and not marginalize those unintentionally. We're going to assume, unintentional marginalization, during that program, but that we have to be really deliberate, right? Really intentional with our outreach, with our efforts to embrace everybody. And when we talk about the gaps in STEM, only the United States is only producing 10% of the STEM for the entire world. Half is being produced by China, and we're behind. And the statistics for girls is even more dire, right? We are just not getting our girls to go into STEM careers. And what you women are talking about is the early intervention, equitable outreach, and really getting it in front of girls as a possibility, right? Speaking that language of possibility for our girls, which I think is incredible. Just to point out for the webinar people, I don't know if you mentioned, Janice, that Janice is in Portland as well. So when she talks about, being able to have the benefit of Sarah's program, and Sarah can feed, Janice, girls to the high school, that's pretty cool. That's a cool synergy. And we hope that people that the webinar, when we're able to send out some resources to you, that we can connect people in the communities where you're at as well, because we want to be able to build that synergy and that cooperation in the cities where you are, where you're local. So each of you spoke about what you need to do to access. I'm getting echo. All right. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what else educators or program providers can do to engage more girls in STEM. You can talk specifically about from an organizational standpoint. And I love that Wendy brought up, Wendy's like, I'm not a teacher per se, but you are. I hear you talk, and you're for sure. But it's, what can we do? Like, how can we help people uptake what you're already doing? And you gave us some great ideas, and I was writing down, whether it's accessing parents, whether it's targeting, low income girls of color, whether it's getting into organizations that are, already have a girl driven, initiative like the Girl Scouts. What else can educators be doing to engage our girls in STEM? And we'll start again with Sarah.
Great. So a couple things that came to mind when I was thinking about how to translate STEM activities into a classroom setting is, and a lot of this is what we do too. So first, my advice would be to keep it simple. STEM activities don't have to be these complicated, multi-step, multi-day things where you need a ton of supplies, especially at the elementary, the younger levels. It's amazing what you can do with a bag of supplies if you give it to the kids. So things like, toothpicks and popsicle sticks and marshmallows, and have them build, the tallest tower they can build. It doesn't take a lot of resources. You don't need to buy expensive kits. Yes, it takes a little creativity and work on the educator's part, which, I'm not a teacher, but as a parent, I know can be overwhelming when my kids come to me and say, Mommy, we want to do experiments today. And I'm like, oh, goodness. But, there's bags that you can just have ready to go. Things, building cup towers. Listening to what Wendy and Janice were saying about trying to speak directly to the girls' interests, and again, not to stereotype, as Wendy said, but one of the things that we found is picking projects that are interesting to the girls. So one of the things that we do, which again doesn't take a lot of resources, is we make bath bombs. And in that, we talk about the acid-base chemistry as far as why is it fizzing? Why are we adding these different things together? And you can find a recipe anywhere for making a bath bomb, but that takes learning chemistry, which a lot of times you say, a girl shuts off, and bring it into something that she might be actually interested in. Or, you can say, we're going to build a robot. And again, the girls are like, oh, I'm not interested in building a robot. But if you say, let's build a robot that's like a prosthetic arm, and talk to them about how they can, how they can help people with these robots, that speaks to the altruistic nature that, again, not stereotyping, but a lot of girls and women have. So yeah, my first advice would just be to keep it simple, and just, come up with ideas. Pinterest, things like that are great to come up with ideas that don't take a lot of resources or time. Second thing would be to encourage failure. And I think this is true for everybody, but especially for girls and women. And it's something I need to remind myself of on a daily basis. I feel like women and girls especially are trained from an early age to be perfect. And we get embarrassed, we get ashamed when we aren't perfect. We feel like we're letting people down. And so to really encourage that failure, and in our workshops, we talk a lot about what can we learn from that failure. So I love the acronym for FAIL is first attempt in learning. So we really, try to stress to the girls that, like, yes, it didn't work out the first time, but nothing works out the first time. And what can you learn as you watch your, design, creation, whatever it is, fail? And I think this is just so important, whether they choose to go into a STEM career or not. It's just such a great lesson to learn. So really encouraging that failure. As others have talked about, providing examples or mentors of women in STEM. There's a great Microsoft video on YouTube. I think it's on our website, but I'm sure you can find it if you look on YouTube, where they ask a group of girls, can you name inventors? And they come up with the typical Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Alexander Graham Bell. Then they ask them, can you name any women inventors? And they are all stumped. And then they go through and show what, all these amazing devices and things that women have invented. And it just really highlighted to me the need to show girls of all ages what women can do in STEM. So this can be, having books in your classroom about women working in different STEM fields. There's some, all different age groups. There's amazing books out there. It can be, talking about women, showing different women in presentations of what they do in STEM. And it can be bringing in local women that are working in tech industries in your neighborhood to talk about what it is that they do. So, like Wendy said, women can't be what they can't see. And I completely agree with that. And so, providing those mentors in a range of forms is so important. And then lastly, I would say just be aware of our own words and unconscious bias. There was a study out of, I think, Stanford, where they said women or moms who made comments to their daughters that I was not good in math and science, that the daughter's own achievement went down just by hearing those words from their mom. So I don't know, about educators, but I would imagine that's something similar, and that we just need to be careful of our words and what we say to our girls about, our own abilities in STEM or their abilities in STEM, and just, really encourage them to be involved in that.
Wow, that's incredible. Yes, that's good advice for, I think, educators or anyone doing programs and outreach, and parents too, that we need to continually speak the language of possibility, right? That just because I didn't like math, for me to transfer that anxiety to somebody, to my child or my students, yeah, we need to be really deliberate to be equitable. I appreciate your advice to keep it simple, right? It doesn't have to, it feels sometimes overwhelming if you're starting a program or trying to expand a program of like, oh my gosh, where am I going to get this stuff? And we'll talk about resources and grants and stuff next. But thank you, Sarah. That was great advice. The same question going to Wendy. How do we uptake this great work that you're doing? What's some advice you have to empower educators to extend their outreach for girls?
Well, I wanted to mention off of what Sarah said about bringing books into the classroom, and and what I had mentioned earlier about the importance of imagery, when we were planning these presentations for girls about introducing drones, we did not find any books that were for younger girls about here's a drone. All of the books that we saw had boys as characters. So we did create the Drone Girl series, and we also have an activity book for boys and girls, but with the characters being girls holding the controls, flying drones. I think that's just very important, again, from what we're saying early on, that the images, they can start to see what they can be. So that speaks to my first point there. We had to create the books ourselves, but I think that, and I do see a lot of books out there about girls in STEM. So I think there's a new one every day. So that is great. We need to do more of that, and teachers, you need to get those in the hands of your students, so that little girls are seeing themselves in some of these books that are encouraging the science and technology and engineering and math. And again, the role models, I don't need to go over that. Bring the person bring the woman into the classroom, or the teenage girls. Oh my gosh, my girls always idolized girls that were older than them. Bring girls from high school who are involved in the science club, and do things like that. I say all these things, and I know different schools have rules and regulations, but there are career days, whatever. Just make sure that there are girls and women and young women talking about how passionate they are about whatever area of STEM they're pursuing. And again, as what Sarah mentioned, reward girls who take risks and fail. In terms of drones, I call it welcome to It's Okay to Crash drone class. I want to get it out there. You're going to crash the drone. It's okay. I crashed the drone. I've crashed a million times, and it's going to happen. And you guys try to fly through that hoop over there, and the first one to crash gets a prize. Reward that failure, literally and figuratively. I'm always sharing my failures and my story, the fact that I'm 53 years old and I flew my first drone 2 years ago. I was a late bloomer. I was scared to death, and my daughters laugh at me that I do it, but I don't care. It's fun and I like it, and I share those stories. And even better when younger women are sharing those stories with these girls as well. And I say dare to be different, speaking again to the fact that my girls were so influenced in middle school by what their friends were doing. And I remember having conversations with them about how cool it was to be different sometimes. And I think the importance of getting moms and dads involved, and to have these discussions, and what do you want to be when you grow up? Take it a step further. And I know a lot of your friends want to be nurses or great professions out there, but you don't have to do what everybody else is doing, that kind of thing. We assume our kids and your students know that, but not all of them do. And I wanted to mention that my oldest daughter is an engineer. She did go on to become a biomedical engineer, and it was her male junior teacher in high school that convinced her to go into biomedical engineering. Nothing that I said or my husband said seemed to work, but when this teacher told her, hey, Amanda, I think you'd be really good because you like the medical sciences, and this is a way to combine that, she was sold. So teachers, you do have a lot of influence, and when you're talking to your students, and make a real difference. So.
And that speaks to what we were talking about before, the power of nomination, right? Where we affirm, what we think their interests are and really support it, whether as family members or educators or program coordinators. That's really important, and it sticks with them clearly. That's incredible. Wendy, I love that you talked about being vulnerable with the girls, letting them know, like, we don't know everything, and we're going to crash and we're going to fail, and we're doing it with you. And I love that that cooperation and familiarity that we can develop with our girls, that we're learning along with you, and we fail and we grow together. I think that's incredible and speaks to your success and what you're doing as a encore career. That's so cool. So Janice, if you wouldn't mind talking to us about what do you think those who are out there running programs or want to develop a program, how can we empower educators and those working in this field to outreach to girls specifically in STEM?
Yeah, definitely. So I agree with what everyone else had talked about, and I actually had the luck of doing my slide last, so I got to look at everyone else's and not make sure I wasn't duplicating too much. So that was lucky for me. So one of the, I have so many points on this, but I chose two specifically that I wanted to talk about. So one is that teachers, and actually people in general, of course, so this isn't necessarily targeted, but obviously just talking to our particular audience today, but teachers being trained in bias is really rare. They're not getting the training that they need in order to be really conscious of the unconscious bias and really understanding those dynamics as deeply as would be ideal, because it's so critical. So there was a study done in the UK that showed that teachers' bias about girls' ability to do math, so their stereotype around that in elementary school, directly affected how high the girls scored in math. So it wasn't just that they were opting out of math, it was that those teachers' beliefs actually caused them to be less good at math. And that's was really fascinating and reminded me yet again what a critical role that teachers play in our children's lives. And I think that that's sometimes downplayed in our society when it absolutely shouldn't be. And again, that's why schools should be putting as much effort into teachers' professional development as they possibly can. And this one was an interesting thing. Actually, obviously this is just one anecdote, but we have an amazing high school teacher who is, she's a volunteer with ChickTech, and she recently started teaching. She had been in the industry, and went back to do this teaching because she felt so strongly about getting more girls into technology and into STEM. And the male teachers aren't playing very nice with her. They have a stereotype about women in technology, and they believe that she's, based on their actions, obviously, that she's not as good. They won't share their curriculum. She has to prove herself first. She doesn't get to sit at their lunch table when they're at trainings. Like, it's really interesting dynamics, and it makes sense, right? Like, schools are not immune to the dynamics that are happening in our society as a whole. And in this particular instance, I think that what we all need to do, regardless of where we're at, is start to feel comfortable stepping into those situations, because she's so isolated. She's doing her best, and it just kills me to hear her stories about this, because all she wants is to improve technology education for everyone, and in particular girls, and she has to fight against this really strong negative influence. And if we all can step into those situations and call that behavior out, because when I think about those teachers, they're teaching a lot of kids, and if this is their behavior towards an adult woman, that bias has to be bleeding into how they're teaching the boys and girls in their classes. And if we don't call that bias out for them in the effort to help educate and to help them understand how their behavior could be affecting their classroom, we're doing a disservice to them, because they probably don't know, and we're doing a disservice to those students as well. And I think that just that would be a huge help. And then, of course, going back to, making the girls feel special and chosen, obviously that's a little bit easier when you have a nomination method, but I don't know if anybody, I just realized since I can't see the audience, I can't ask the question if people have heard about microaggressions and microaffirmations, but so microaggressions, for people who aren't familiar, are all of those little tiny comments, those little tiny actions that people are subject to if they're not part of the dominant culture, especially when you're looking at places where they're a distinct minority in terms of race or ethnicity or gender or whatever. It's just little things like, oh, I thought you were in the wrong class. Like, this is an engineering class. Aren't you looking for somewhere else? You know, or like just those little things that tell people that everyone assumes they shouldn't be there. And microaffirmations are one of the few things that I've heard of that are actually known to combat microaggressions. So those little things of, wow, you're so good at this class. I really, I'd like to put this struggling student with you because I think that you'd be a really good influence on them, for them. Or, I noticed that you really have this down. Can you come up and show us on the board? Because I really think the other students can learn from you. So ensuring that even if you realize that you have that unconscious bias, that you're actively working against that, because that will help reduce your unconscious bias, and it will help that student to feel like they really truly do belong in your technology class or in your STEM class, and help to build their confidence, so when they go up against those other microaggressions from other people, that they're just a little bit stronger and that they don't sink in quite as deep.
And Janice, the work you're talking about, people have centered their entire careers around the field of identity in women and the gaps that persist in STEM. And I think we need to recognize as educators and program providers that the gaps are there for a reason, right? So I mean, we have just huge disparities in women in the STEM fields. They're there deliberately. And so as women, as leaders, as educators, as mothers, as the thread of a good example, we do need to be intentional, be deliberate, and it ends up translating sometimes as social justice work, right? I don't know how many social justice warriors out there are, but this work to just provide equity, to get our girls in the realm, like in the same playing field, is really important work, that we allow them to have that identity option. And it's not a reasonable expectation that every girl is going to go into a STEM career, right? A STEM field, but at least it's an option for them. At least it's within their purview of like, I can do that, it's for me, or not. But what our work here enables is that these girls can speak that language of possibility and know that there's women that have their backs and see what is real and what is potential. And so I can't emphasize enough the work, the critical nature of the work that you do, Wendy and Janice and Sarah. So thank you. Thank you for being an example and sharing what we should be doing as educators for these girls. And I know we're running close to the end of our webinar, but I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about funding and resources, because everything we're talking about, even if it's just a small bag of materials like Sarah was talking, we still have to get access to that, right? We need to be able to develop that opportunity. So what are your tips for us about funding and resources so we're enabled to do this work with girls? I'll start with Sarah. Thank you.
Okay. So my big thing with this is maybe a little different than what the other ladies are going to talk about, but I encourage you to think outside the box. Obviously, money is key to do any type of activity, but there are so many other resources out there besides money. So, as a nonprofit organization, people are often surprised to hear that, our operating budget is less than $5,000 a year, which I know is, really small, and we are new, but we get a lot of resources outside of money. So one of the things is we have companies will provide volunteers for us. So you can bring these volunteers into your classroom too. Offering space or facility tours is a huge thing. We found that a lot of local companies, and I think being in Portland, we do have a decent amount of tech companies here. So we are unique in that way. Some more rural areas might not have that opportunity, but companies want to get involved, and they might not have the funding to give dollars, but they want to do other things. So it takes a little bit of work to, engage them. But, so bringing a group of girls to a facility and having a tour of their manufacturing or of their laboratory space is something that you can ask for, and a lot of times are given. For us, we get our space for our workshops donated, and that saves us a lot of money in different ways. You can also ask for donated supplies. So again, companies often have, they get discounts on their, on Office Max and stuff like that. So they're more than willing to buy you popsicle sticks or straws or things like that, so you can put together those bags of stuff. So donating supplies is big, or facilitating an activity for your class. So a lot of organizations have, or companies have, outreach programs, education programs, where they have different activities that they can bring into your classroom and facilitate for you there, which wouldn't take any prep work or any resources, funding from your schools or your classroom. But again, those things I understand, they take time on your part as a resource to organize that, which is, I understand is difficult. But so my main point with that is just to, think outside the box, and that there's a lot of things that you can get outside of money that can allow you to do STEM activities in your school. Another thing I just thought of now that's not on my slide is ask your families, the parents of your kids, if they, have STEM backgrounds, like, would they be willing to come in and do an activity with your classroom? Would they be willing to come in and talk to the class about what it is that they do? It doesn't, it can be men, women, whatever, but that's a great way of engaging your community. You can host STEM nights at your school, which I know a lot of schools do. And so, really engaging your community is another great way to bring STEM into your classrooms for low cost. And as I said before, you just have to get creative, which I know I've said that I understand the challenge and the time commitment that takes. But if you can, devote a couple hours to just putting together some kits that you can have at your disposal at your classroom, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to cost a lot. It's just something that you can have on hand. So really just to kind of get creative about what you do as far as activities go.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Wendy.
I wish I could tell you there is a magic website out there that is going to fund your STEM program by just clicking the button, but I don't think it's out there. My list is similar to Sarah's and very practical. I realize in terms of but I do believe that that there is STEM and STEAM are gaining in popularity in terms of people are not starting to know what that stands for, and that parents and corporations, local businesses, they want our kids to succeed, and they understand there's a problem with just the statistics you cited about how few kids are getting involved in STEM, and especially girls, and they want to address the problem. So if you're lucky enough to be in a school district where parents are involved, I say approach the PTO, have a parent start a GoFundMe page. We want to buy a set of drones for our school, and we have to go outside of the school funding to do it. Harness the power of parents who want their kids to have it all in their school. And corporate community partners, like Sarah was saying, we here in St. Louis have Boeing, and Boeing has a lot of employee organizations as well. Women in Aviation has chapters all over the United States, and those kinds of organizations are interested in finding ways to put their energy and members to good use by funding STEM girl type programs, especially drones related to aviation. Women in science organizations, just approach them. But you have to have your plea and your pitch ready for them. But again, it includes imagery. It includes, here's what we want to do. These are the kids that we want to teach these girls. We want to get them interested in STEM. Or if you have universities and community colleges, bring them on board and use those students to and get some money from them to be able to sponsor a STEM club at your school. It takes creativity, but sometimes it's you never know. And then from my background in a TV journalism, in the TV journalism world, some of those things are worthy of a story. There's a GoFundMe page to get these girls. There was a Moxie Club in Arizona. This is a true story. Girls, a teacher who started a girls Moxie STEM club, and through connections, I knew somebody who did a story about their desire to have some new drones so that they could get this going, and it got TV coverage. So you just have to be creative.
That's awesome. And I hear from both you and Wendy and Sarah saying that you kind of need to have your pitch ready. You need to be really specific with your ask, right? Like know exactly what you want, and and not be afraid to make a call, make a cold call sometimes. And every time as a STEM coordinator myself, when I'm asking, I mean, even local business, they're so excited that someone's doing this STEM work. And you're right, Wendy, they want to help close those gaps too. And they're like, shoot, what can we do to help? And they're like, oh, you only need $100 to be able to host that, a drones camp. Done. And I found 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes, or they're going to help connect you with the resources. And like Sarah's saying, they can provide people power, they can provide a space, and they're really willing to help. We just got to ask. You got to know what you want specifically and go get it. It's like we're showing our girls, right?
Right.
And Janice, what tips do you have for us? Resources, funding, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a few programs that I wanted to really focus on that were very concrete. So there's the NC Would Aspire IT program. So there's the Aspirations in Computing Awards that they do for high school students. And basically high school students apply, and they, there's a judging process, and then they get an award. And so if they are an Aspirations winner, they're then eligible to apply for a grant through this NC Would Aspire IT program. And so they will then, if they get this grant, they can then run a camp for elementary, middle school, or high school girls in that area. And then college women in computer science, any college woman can apply for something like that. So if you have someone in your local area who's a college student in computer science, and she would be interested in doing something like this to gain leadership experience, this could be a really great opportunity for her and for you and your school to get engaged with that. Tech companies, yeah, if you say this entire thing's only going to cost $500, $500 is really easy for many tech companies to do. So if it shows that that's going to make a huge impact on girls, it's definitely worth asking for. And then, or they often, if you need laptops for a program, often they'll have, every 2 years, they'll cycle out their laptops. And especially if it's like a MacBook, they're still pretty great after 2 years. So if you can get into something like that and get them to donate those to your program or to your camp, that's a really great resource. And then Tech Girls is one of our partners with ChickTech. They're over in Philly. They create these really awesome tech shops in a box. So you don't just have to think outside the box. You can also think inside this box right here. But they definitely check out their website. That's really great curriculum that you can just take and use. It's 1 to 2 plus hours of a workshop. So you don't have to make it yourself, which is nice. And if you're looking for volunteers, definitely one of the things that we've done in our local areas is partner with adult programs that don't have a youth component. So if you're like, man, I really need some people to come mentor youth or whatever it might be, places like Women Who Code or even somewhere like Lesbians Who Tech are really great places to reach out to and say, in your local area and say, hey, I'm looking for 5 people to come and help mentor these students for an hour. Would you be willing to send out the word? And they'll most likely have depending on where you're at, hundreds to thousands of people on their email list who would most likely be thrilled to come and spend an hour with your students.
And to connect with what Janice is saying, I have found that some tech companies, and I'm in Boise, Idaho, which isn't huge, but we have some tech and local industry companies that they have outreach initiatives even within the mission of their company. And if you connect with them and just say like, hey, I don't know if you have people that can help us come code, you know, we'd like some women to come in and talk about it. They're excited that someone came to them for them to fulfill their own mission objectives of doing some outreach, particularly with girls or underrepresented and low income, you know, schools. So I have found, again, going back to what Wendy and Sarah and everyone's sort of saying, is you've got to get creative, make some of those phone calls, and it finds that the missions often align. Those resources are out there. You just got to go make a couple of calls and see who's available. Often they're very excited to work with kids. They really are. So,
and I forgot, I wrote down a little note on my notepad, but forgot to say it. There's a new magazine it's focused on high school students, but it's called Reinvented Magazine. And they just did a Kickstarter in June. And so I think they're pre-selling their first issue right now for like $8.50. But it's all about like hearing about women's careers and getting tips and advice and such as a high school student. So you should definitely check that out, because for $8.50, it'd be super cool for a bunch of classrooms to have a copy of this magazine just hanging out for people to check out, whether it's boys or girls, so that we can all start normalizing that a little bit more.
That's awesome. Thank you. And you know what PCS is compiling all these resources and going to send out these slides to all the webinar participants, because I know I've been taking some notes on things the panelists have been saying, but we'll send everything out so everybody has your thoughts and your advice for educators. So I know it's a few minutes past 4 o'clock, but there were a few questions and themes that came in for the panelists. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to shoot a couple of questions your way.
All right, from Sammy, she's got a question for the entire panel. Do you consider art for girls in STEAM?
Okay, so I know Wendy had mentioned that too. So the question is, how does art fit into girls in STEM? How does that component? Is it girls in STEAM? What do you think about that, ladies?
Very important, obviously, and in the drone industry, obviously photography is art, and so we talk a lot about that. And I think that very important.
Yeah, we try to bring in art to some of our different projects that we do with our girls. So one of the really simple things we do, and you can find this easily online how to do it, is we make harmonicas with popsicle sticks, rubber bands, and pieces of straw. And so that brings in the musical aspect of art, but then we also can talk about, well, why is it making these sounds? So we talk about the oscillation of the rubber band and how you can change the pitch by changing that oscillation. So you really bring in that art component. We've also made artistic robots that are these little kind of wiggle bots with a motor and battery and a handful of supplies, that they create a robot that can make art on its own. And at the end of our workshops, we have the girls all put it onto one big butcher block on the floor, and they create this really cool artwork project. So yeah, I think it's important to bring that in, whether it's in web development with, the aesthetics of apps and websites and stuff like that, that helps to speak to the girls and what their interests are. So I think it's very important.
Absolutely. Janice, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. So one, I think, there's two pieces, and I'm trying to not sound heretic here, so I'm trying to figure out how to say this so that it isn't like that. But so with at ChickTech, we in general just use the word STEM and not STEAM. One, is because I feel like the art is already in there. So like when you were talking, Sarah, about the, the web design and development, that art and creativity is already in. And then two, there's so many amazing ways that we can combine tech with all of these other really cool interests. And so maybe it's not art, but maybe it's fashion, which is a little bit art as well, but you know what I mean, like all of those different things. And so I feel like the artistic part is super critical and is a really engaging piece of that. And there's also many other ways, like if you're like, when you were talking about like search and rescue, there may not be art in there, but it's a way to really engage people and help them to understand how it fits in with their current interests. And I sometimes when I see the word STEAM, I worry that people feel like there's not that artistic element or the creative element already in those STEM fields, when in reality, like all that problem solving and all of those pieces I see are so embedded in there that I don't want people to think, well, you have to bring, and we actually do bring in art supplies all the time. So I'm also not saying that that's a bad thing, because it does really engage them and get them excited. But just there's some really amazing like beauty and artistic elements to coding or working with hardware in itself.
Yeah. I think the question really gets at, and I hear every one of you articulating it, is that, again, being intentional to provide as many access points to, the STEM content and STEM context, and art is a brilliant way, right? Creativity and design is a great way to get girls involved in STEM. It's just finding, like all of you have said, what they're interested in and really maximizing that to build in those STEM components. So that's a great question.
Here's another question for the panel. How do we get the girls to separate themselves from cultural stereotypes they've been exposed to from an early age?
So again, I don't know if everyone heard that. So again, those cultural stereotypes that girls have been sort of indoctrinated with, right? What we talked about with the gaps and with identity and maybe low access and low interest just because of the message, either directly or inadvertently they've received. How do we move beyond that?
I think one of the key things there is providing mentors that look like them. To be, honest here, you look at the panel that we have, and we are, a bunch of white women. And so, they need to see people that look like them, that, if English isn't their first language, that speak like them. So providing books, providing women of color that do those things is really important, so that they can see that that is an option for them.
And Sarah, soy Latina.
Yes, no.
I mean, and I say that just, kidding, but, I'm first generation college. I'm first generation high school graduate. I'm getting my PhD right now. I take it really in this, in the STEM arena. So I take it really seriously that I came from a background where, my father has an 8th grade education. He was a migrant worker picking cotton, and the sacrifices that he made so that I could go to school, so that I understood what possibilities lay, ahead of me. And I'm very deliberate when I tell my students, sometimes we have to work twice as hard to get half as far. But I'm here with you, and these resources are available, and I'm going to help connect you with this world out there that of potential, right? Potential and opportunity. So being really explicit with our students that they can do this. And like you said, Sarah, get people in front of them that look like them, that mirror their culture. And just like Wendy said, you can't be what you can't see. So we need to have women of color. We need to have different ability levels. We need to have people that have a similar story as their own, and to build that perseverance. Did anybody else have any thoughts about how to combat some of those cultural messages or maybe stereotypes that they're trying to break through?
Just that you're right, it's extremely important to provide the images. The co-founder, or actually the founder of Women in Drones, Sharon Rossmark, is African American, and it's very important for her to show herself out there, and when we do these presentations and in our imagery. And also the books we wrote, they come in Spanish as well, because we know not only do we need more girls in STEM, we need diversity in STEM, and in terms of gender and race. And show these girls, we need to show them what they can be.
That's awesome. That's so cool that you went and wrote the books, Wendy.
Yeah,
so
we're proud of it. We just couldn't believe they weren't out there. And you hear a lot of entrepreneurs say it wasn't there, so I had to create it. And I think we all need to do more of that.
That's awesome. Janice, what did you think?
Yeah, one of the things that, and I'm not quite sure when a good age to start this is, but actually talking about it. So for example, and this is a tangential example, I guess, but so we, at one of our events, we showed the documentary Misrepresentation. I don't know if you all have seen that, about how women are represented in the media. I would definitely recommend, if the people on this call haven't been able to watch that you check it out. I think it's still on Netflix or somewhere like that, so free or really inexpensive. But when we showed that to those girls, they were furious. They were so mad that all of these things had been done to them, right, that they were unaware of, that there were all these factors that were telling them how they should feel about themselves and their bodies and their worth, and that no one had ever talked to them about these things before, and that that it was happening in general, obviously. And so there's actually discussion questions you can have that you can use after seeing that video. And one of the things that I realized after we watched that was, and we had that discussion, was that when we come up against stereotypes that we don't realize are stereotypes, we often internalize those. And so when somebody's like, you're just really not good at math, like their stereotype may be, well, you're a girl, of course you're not good at math. What you think is, well, that person sounded so sure of themselves, I must not be good at math. Like, I personally, it's not because I'm a girl, it's not because it's a stereotype. And to me, when we talk about these things and we're open and honest, because they see so much, right? Like, we think that, oh, they're kids and they just don't really know. They know, right? There's a lot of those things. And I feel like when we talk to them about it and we give them the knowledge to almost arm themselves with, that then they can fight back internally, right? When somebody says, you're just not very good at math, you can be like, hold on a second. Again, internally in your brain, you're like, wait a second, am I really not good at math? Or does that person think that I'm not good at math because I'm a girl? And there's like a little brick wall, right? And instead of just digging its nasty little hooks into you, you can stop it. But without that brick wall there, you don't have any evidence to the contrary that it might not be you. And I think that that's particularly important with women of color or people who are low income or whatever it might be, that is where our society has negative stereotypes about their abilities to do various things. Again, if we don't talk about it, they don't know.
Well said.
Okay, we still have a lot of questions pouring in, but we've run out of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to share all of these questions with our panelists, and in 2 to 3 days, we'll send an email to everybody with a copy of the video recording and answers to several of these other questions. Today's giveaway is sponsored by PCS Edventures. Girls Can Build comes with instructor guides, 6 lessons for K through 2nd grade, 6 lessons for grades 3 to 5, plus 13 printed sets of student pages and lab cards, all the supplies needed for all 12 lessons, 10,000 BrickLab bricks. Girls Can Build encourages girls to explore, experiment, communicate, and problem solve. Please make sure to complete the brief survey at the end of this presentation. There is no purchase necessary to win, but do please complete the survey at the end of this webinar. Thank you everybody for joining us on the Girls in STEM webinar and the women who inspire them. To Sonia Galaviz and our panelists, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights and knowledge and best practices with our audience. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this webinar and we'll hope to see you in the next one. If anybody has any questions about our products, feel free to visit us at edventures.com or reach out to our STEM ambassadors who are very knowledgeable and can learn about your programming and make recommendations that fit your budget and your needs by reaching us at sales@edventures.com or calling us at 1-800-429-3110. See you all at the next webinar.